case no one has noticed, this is a high quality department. This is a great department. I inherited a great department 22 years ago from Larry Green with great people in it, and it remains today a great department. And on this occasion, when the privilege of leading this great department passes from me to Myra, I'd like to reflect for a few minutes on just a few aspects of where we've come from and where we are today. If you fly over our department at 35,000 feet, the first thing you'll notice is that we're bigger by a lot and more complex, which always follows growth, whether you want it to or not. We used to be a small village, one main street, all in sight of one another. You could lean out your window and see everybody in the department. One clinic, one residency clinic, a thin stream of research. Everybody could fit in one room. Now, it had to be a big room, but everybody could fit in one room. But since then, whoa, the overall budget of this department has grown each year, almost without exception, a few bad years along the way, until it's now a $50 million a year department with hundreds of faculty and staff and more programs than I can keep up with. I am embarrassed to say that I literally do not know all the programs we've got in this department, and that's the truth. Myra, good luck. I hope you do better than I do in that way. We've got, but now, we've got 4 clinics inside the department and additional department faculty practicing in another dozen and a half places around the city and around the state. Our education programs have likewise multiplied. Our research portfolio has exploded. Our research portfolio has become one of the largest, and just counting PIs and people who are investigators on grants, maybe the largest family medicine research shop that has ever existed in the US. We've got this practice transformation shop that's run $100 million through its programs. It's a one-of-a-kind resource. It's a national resource. And so I am bewildered by the amount of growth. I'm not a growth junkie. I don't ask for this, but that is what's happened because that's what's wanted to happen. That's what's needed to happen here. And I want you to keep in mind something. All of these programs have been seeded and have grown and are operated by people who are still here and will still be here after we complete this leadership transition. So I want to dwell for a moment on 5 different things that have grown up in this department in particular, 5 things that we might be known for or that are emblematic of our excellence. Number 1, behavioral health. We've long known that primary care, apart from behavioral health care, is incomplete and ineffective. That behavioral health care, that is, addressing the mental, emotional, and behavioral health needs of our patients, must be integrated into the very fabric of ordinary primary care if we are to address most or all of our patients' health concerns, one of the fundamental principles of primary care. We've known that for a long time, and over the past 2 decades, we've actually transformed our clinics to operate by this principle. We have primary care psychologists, social workers, psychiatric nurse clinicians, and psychiatrists working side by side as core team members in all our clinics. This is a winning formulation, and people, practices, and departments from all over the country seek us out to learn how we do this and to emulate our models. But there's still very much to know about this. How many and which behavioral health clinicians? How do you actually train a primary care behavioral health clinician? For what conditions Under what circumstances and at what costs do you do this kind of integrated care? What are the best models for integrating that kind of care? And on and on. The questions are endless. We still have a lot to learn about how to do this to best effect. So that is a thing that I want to describe as a feature of this department that I don't want you to think is a deal that's done. This is a process that we're in the process of continuing to refine and evolve and extend and realize, because it ain't easy, it ain't automatic, and it doesn't always do in the event like it looks like it would on paper. Number 2, community engagement. Likewise, we've long known that health is won and lost in communities and in families, and that we in family medicine are most effective at helping people become healthier when we function as a member of a community-wide team, integrated not only with behavioral healthcare clinicians, but also with public health, with social service agencies such as housing, transportation, education, the juvenile justice system, and so on, and with local health efforts, by which I mean, you know, whether we're talking about our hospitals, sometimes it's local hospitals, sometimes it's the YMCA or the YWCA, faith-based organizations, churches that have diabetes education classes in their basements on Wednesday nights, and others. These can be potent partnerships, but they're difficult partnerships. They're difficult to establish and maintain, and we're really at an early stage at learning the details of what works, with whom, under what conditions, for what conditions, and so on. We have so much more to offer than we're offering, and we have so much more to learn about how to make those partnerships so that we can realize our full potentials. We're pretty early in the natural history of our formulation, creation, and maintenance of those kinds of partnerships. I think our work here has been a beautiful accomplishment, but it's just begun, and we have so much more to learn here. Number 3, rural health. When I got here 22 years ago, one of the early things our then dean, Dick Krugman, said to me was that the University of Colorado did not mean Colorado Boulevard, that we were responsible for the whole state, and most of it is rural. Well, since that time, we've developed programs that touch hundreds of thousands of Colorado folk. With clinical services and with education and training programs, with technical support, with pipeline programs, with policy briefs, and with unbelievably helpful research that helps us know how to become more effective at helping these underserved people. We are recognized as a national leader in rural healthcare, but rural Coloradans are still underserved and less healthy than their suburban or our urban counterparts. And there's still a lot left for us to do here. We are not even close to done with our efforts at improving the fate of our rural Coloradans. Number 4, cultivation and training for leadership. This department has set leadership and leadership training as a priority and has made good on that as a guiding priority. We are flush with national and international leaders in our field and in medicine in general. We've got faculty who are trained to teach and develop leaders. Hear that again. We have faculty who are trained to teach and develop leaders. And we have a deep core of leadership mentors. This is so beneficial for us here. And I have every confidence that this emphasis on leadership and leadership development will continue. Number 5, a drive to innovate, to go after the hard questions. Of all of the features of this department that make me proudest to live and work here, this is the greatest. You people are courageous and imaginative and persistent and ready to fight for what's right, even if you don't know how to do it. I love that. I'm just proud to be in a place where we try new and better ways to help people become healthier, even if these ways are hellishly difficult. I love working with people who actually try bright ideas instead of moaning about why they won't work. I look into every mission area in our department and I see programs that make me go, who would have thought of that? Or, wow, this is actually working. Or, this would work if we only. So I think there are a lot of specific instances of and evidence of what I mean by a drive to innovate and to go after the hard questions. The precipice and the salons that follow from that. There's a lot of examples, but we don't have to worry about those. Those come and go, so long as we maintain the spirit of innovation and tackling the hard problems. I think we're going to be just fine. So for each of these 5 things that are works in progress, I'd like to mention 3 areas that are really works in progress, where we have not yet distinguished ourselves, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that we haven't. These are 3 areas that have been gnawing at me for a long time. Number 1, perhaps the most important, is developing a system for comprehensive evaluation. I'm not talking about the subset of research where we judge whether some new thing we're testing works or not. We should be evaluating the effect of every last thing that we do, whether it's innovative or not, whether it's part of a fancy research idea or an educational effort or just plain homemade clinical care. Are we doing what we say we're doing? Does it help people? Who does it help? Who can best do it? For how long? And so on. This is just a fundamental principle of reaching a goal in a changing world. Test, adjust, test, adjust. We resist this because we like to think we're succeeding, but that's different from knowing what we're doing. So I think building comprehensive evaluation into every move we make would help us become more effective. The second is getting a better grip on improving the diversity of our makeup and more effectively addressing the disparities in the health of the people we say we serve. You know, we've been making desultory efforts at this for decades, but we've barely scratched a difference. We're in the middle of a wave of motivation right now, nationally and locally, to attack this. And I think that's great. But I'm really worried that this will pass after a few symbolic gestures and a few easy wins, and we'll settle back into our comfortable racist, sexist conventions, and we'll continue to discriminate against the discriminated and to underserve the underserved. We've got to recognize that this will be and should be a long, painful slog, and we must never let go of our aspiration to look like the people we serve and to fight for the health of every last human being in our sight. And the third has to do with how we get paid. It's pretty well understood by people all around the world who make it their business to know that primary care fails when the clinicians are paid fee for service, for God's sake. And yet that is largely how we're paid here, on the basis of visit or RVU productivity. Primary care at its best does not turn on visits at all, but rather on recognizing the interacting tangle of problems our patients have, sorting these by importance and urgency, creating a personal care plan that's family and community context sensitive, and helping patients make sense of what's going on and heal or gain health and get connected for support with their lives. If you didn't hear Becca and Kurt for the last hour, then all is lost, and I don't have to say this stuff because they just gave you a beautiful, eloquent, evidence-based rationale for what I just said. I think we got to begin living that way in our day-to-day clinical realities. That's what we should be paid for, not how many patients you can see in a half day or a month or how many RVUs you can generate. Till we get that sorted out, our primary care will be unnecessarily difficult and demoralizing and necessarily ineffective. We've just got to go after that. And it's one of the things I intend to continue working on as a new member of the Farley Center. I think this is an area, this is a place where we really need to put our lever under the stone and move the world. Now, finally, I want to say that in these perilous times, when so much is wrong in our world, I am resting in pure confidence. I'm comfortable and confident about this department's future. Your next chair, Myra Muramoto, is just stone excellent. I know her, and I've watched her closely, what she can do and what she has done, and I'm proud that she has agreed to be our next leader. And I thank Dean Riley for going to a lot of trouble to win her to this department. Remember, she's already succeeded as a chair for 6 years in a large, complicated, difficult department. She knows what she's doing. Her intelligence and her character and her values and her kindness are impeccable. With you guys on the job and Myra at the helm, this next round is going to be really something. And one of my motivations to live another 5 or 10 years is to watch this unfold, because this is going to be great. And I think that's enough from me. Y'all have heard me yap for years on end, and it's time for me to be quiet. And it's always best to close any project or any talk under time and under budget. So I'm done. And with that, I give you your next chair, Myra Muramoto.
Thank you, Frank. Let me figure out how I'm going to do this. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time this morning and attention. And I'm going to move over the little bar so I can see people here. Frank, you know, it's a daunting feeling to follow in the heels of someone that's such a beloved and legendary chair. And I want to thank you for just so eloquently reminding us all about the journey that you and this department have been on and what you've accomplished together. And although this talk got titled On the Horizon, I didn't quite pick that title. I'm going to back up a little bit before talking about future horizons. Because when I interviewed for this position, one of the interviewers asked me a question that's always stood out in my mind from that single visit to campus. Because of COVID, it was a strange recruit. I pretty much saw the inside of Fitzsimmons conference room and a couple of offices in AO1, and that was pretty much it. So when the interviewers came in, she sat down, looked at me straight in the eye and said, "Who are you?" So first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, who I am, and this will give you some of the context that has led me to who I am today and how I got here. And these are some of the influences that have shaped my life, my career, and how I think about the world. Right, just gonna. So, okay, here we go. I was born in Tucson, Arizona, and raised there. I've lived until I moved to Colorado, lived there most of my life. I was a rare Tucsonan native who still remained in this amazingly eclectic and a little bit crazy city. We're 60 miles north of the US-Mexico border. It's a city famous for its hot, dry summers and monsoon thunderstorms. And Tucson is a place that celebrates its hot summers, its frontier heritage, college basketball, and food. You'll find out about me, I love food. And Tucson is the UNESCO City of Gastronomy, the first one in Northern America. So, So what else about me? I am a child of the desert. Summer was always my favorite time of year. The college kids and snowbirds went home, the town kind of slowed down, and only us desert rats remained. But I also love the mountains, which is one of the things that drew me to Colorado. I grew up camping and fishing in the mountains. For some of our long rodeo weekend holidays, some families would go to Disneyland, some would go to the rodeo. My family went camping, and I was blessed with summer road trips to basically all the national parks in the US. So about those influences growing up, I'm a grandchild of immigrants from immigrant laborers from China and Japan. And the city I grew up in is also a place that celebrates its cultural diversity. We have a festival every year that's called Tucson Meet Yourself. We celebrate Dia de los Muertos, where hundreds of thousands of people turn out for the All Souls Parade. We also celebrate the rodeo with a rodeo parade. When I was a kid, I rode in the rodeo parade. Both of my parents were educators. They were highly engaged in civic and cultural affairs. So I grew up exposed to all kinds of diversity: race, ethnicity, religion, culture, language, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. This has really been one of my life's greatest blessings. A little bit more about gender equity. My mother's Chinese traditional family believed it was only important to educate boys. So she competed fiercely with her older brothers for access to education and to skills, like learning to drive. The family legend is that she, in teaching herself learn to drive, also managed to wreck the car. Her younger brother also had an intellectual disability, so she eventually became the major caregiver. My mother, she spoke only Spanish and Chinese until she went to school. But then she went on and she later earned a bachelor's and 2 master's degrees. I said my parents were both educators. My mom was a science, high school and junior high science teacher. My dad was a professor of agronomy who worked in classical plant breeding research. And I said my mother role modeled independence from gender-defined cultural roles. She taught me I could be anything, choose any profession, if I was willing to work hard enough. But until my last year in high school, I was actually much more inclined towards the visual arts and writing poetry. I was not one of those kids who knew I wanted to be a doctor when I turned 4. But then my mother's health started failing because of diabetes. When I was about 12, she started really developing some of the notorious end organ complications of diabetes. And increasingly, I became one of the major caregivers. And by high school, I had spent a lot of time with doctors and in hospitals. And all that exposure got me interested in medicine. And one of the things that's kind of precedent in some ways, I had the chance to shadow a family physician who was also a pioneer in the field of patient education. And this was Winter Griffith. So actually my contact with the department that raised me in Tucson actually began when I was a high school senior. So being the child of educators, it was really compelling to me that the potential of patient education to empower patients engaged in improving their own health, this was very appealing to me. So when I enrolled in college, I had changed from a fine arts major to a science major. Then diabetes continued to have a shadow in my life. When I was 18, a freshman in college, my mother suddenly died. She suffered a cardiac arrest while on dialysis. And after she died, I realized and did a lot of reflection and realized she had had many excellent doctors who each took care, very good care of her parts. But there wasn't a doctor who cared for her. And I meant her in her entirety as a person, which included her roles as a wife, a mother, and also a very strong-willed matriarch of our family. So when it came time to apply to medical school, I knew I wanted to be a family physician. This is my husband, Doug. Doug Tarrant We love the outdoors and being active outside. I met Doug through my international health work shortly after I moved back to the US from Africa. He's trained as an international nutrition and public health. So we have complementary skills and we regularly work on projects together. And to unwind, you can see we do lots of things. We love to cook. We like to hike, anything outdoors. And I enjoy just hanging out with my desert tortoise, Matilda, who fortunately was adopted when I left Tucson. And my favorite refuge for R&R was our cabin in Flagstaff. And here you see a field of sunflowers that was really near our house. And we love to hike, bike, just hang out, cook, just chill out. So back to the question of who are you? Now, this is about me professionally. When I was asked that question, I answered, I've done a lot of things in my checkered career, but my primary professional identity is that I'm a family physician. I first joined the UA Department of Family Community Medicine. I was a clinical educator, practicing the full scope of family medicine, hospital care, ICU, deliveries, and I was also starting to work in addiction treatment. I started participating in national substance abuse education programs through STFM and got my first taste of educational intervention research. My work in Africa opened my eyes to the power of public health in changing people's lives on not just a one-by-one, but a population basis. So when I got back from Africa, I enrolled in the new public health degree program. And until recently, I proudly held the record for taking the longest to finish my degree. My myriad experiences, they kind of coalesce together in a different way. And I decided I'd do a fellowship in integrative medicine. Integrative medicine is now incorporated in my practice and my research. I conducted 2 NIH studies that are practice-based studies looking at the practitioners of chiropractic, acupuncture, and massage, and how they could incorporate US Public Health Service guidelines for tobacco cessation into their routine clinical care. And then most recently, clinically, my career experiences again sort of came together in a different way, and this was the practice of obesity medicine. I started learning about obesity medicine because even though I have a bachelor's degree in nutritional science, I wasn't being very successful treating it. And it was the root cause of about 2/3 of what I was seeing in my family practice, those chronic diseases. So a colleague and I started an obesity treatment program with interdisciplinary care model teams and shared medical appointments. And I found it a very gratifying practice because it required the biopsychosocial view and the attention to patient culture and social determinants of health that is so foundational to family medicine. It is a joyful practice because I actually saw people get healthier, lose weight, and regain their lives. Oops, meant to click on that one. So I also had an international experience. I have had the good fortune and blessing to work in a number of different countries that you see here, but that profoundly changed how I think about the world and even how I think about interventions and programs. So in 1992, I moved to Lesotho to lead a nutrition survey measuring the health impacts of a massive water development project. At that time, it was the largest heavy construction project in the world. And Lesotho is a small mountainous country. It's totally surrounded by South Africa, for those of you that don't know it. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. I moved there at a very interesting time politically as well. I moved there about 3 weeks before the all-race elections referendum in South Africa that marked the beginning of the political dismantling of apartheid. And what you see here is a typical Lesotho village. Surprisingly, a lot of it looked like northern Arizona. Also, you see us in our research team in Nepal And that was me working with some of our Nepalese staff. So one of the things when I was working overseas, I noticed that there was a lot of emphasis on development, capacity building, but not so much on sustainability. And so I really saw the vestiges of billions to trillions of dollars in aid that was spent in well-intentioned development and capacity building, but with little thought of sustainability. And it struck me that I was also, with that, seeing the lingering effects of colonialism and its costs to the human spirit. So that had a profound impact on how I think about things. And I also saw how primary care and clinical delivery system and public health are a lot less segregated in low and middle income countries. And it occurred to me, in the US, we have some things we could learn from that. So these experiences collectively profoundly impacted both my approach to research, intervention development, and programs. So now I think about and design for sustainability from the beginning. So I'll also say I had a pretty checkered career in research, and maybe it's because I was raised by 3 anthropologists academically, a physical anthropologist, cultural anthropologist, and a medical anthropologist. When I was joined STFM, I got interested in substance abuse education, did some work there. The physical and medical anthropologists got me into international health. And then when I got back from Africa, I met a researcher who was working on tobacco cessation. And when I came back from Africa, I thought I wanted to work on treating the substance addictions that had the greatest public health impact, and that was tobacco and alcohol. And so I met a guy that was working on tobacco and joined up with him to be the doctor for he was a PhD, he's doing lots of clinical trials, and he needed a study doc. So I sort of learned how to do clinical trials from the ground up. We did lots of NIH trials, we did lots of pharmaceutical trials. It was really some OJT training. Most of my research has been with special populations. Those are socioeconomically vulnerable or disenfranchised, racial and ethnic minorities, adolescents, low-income pregnant women, rural African Americans, military, and then the populations in low and middle income countries. I've done a fair amount of community-based research, and the practice-based research, surprisingly, I've done it more in complementary alternative medicine practices rather than primary care. But over time, my research has kind of evolved into or coalesced into focus on the power of human connection. And I'm interested and I work on interventions with personal networks and their power to influence health. So we call them health influencers, and these are the people in our everyday lives, family and friends, coworkers, educators, and clinicians and service providers, even strangers that have the opportunity, the motive, and they're engaged to have those conversations to help influence health. This was also influenced by my medical anthropologist friend and colleague. Then, as I think about over this sort of checkered career in research, I realize that a lot of it is about connections, networks and networks. I see the things that I've had the blessing to participate in. And as a family doc, I'm interested in connections, and I believe that connections matter. So I started out looking at things that were more pharmaceutical in nature, impacting metabolic and neuronal pathways. And then as I think about the obesity work and addictions, disease, but that also interacts a lot with the social network. And because I'm a clinician also trained in public health, I know there's another level that's not represented in that diagram on the previous slide, and that is the community networks. And to the left there are us as a community of healthcare providers and researchers, and those of us that are in the healthcare system but we're also part of this larger network of community and all that that entails in terms of our organizations and our cultures and our way of going about doing things and understanding each other, connecting with each other. So when I was interviewing, people repeatedly asked me, they said, you have spent your entire life in Tucson, and you spent your entire career and all your training at the University of Arizona. Why would you leave? And I was asked that question multiple times. And so here's the answer to that question. I was attracted to this department, and this would be really perhaps one of maybe only 2 positions I would have ever even considered, because I was happy in Tucson. I loved my department. I was not looking to leave. I was attracted to your mission, your vision, your values, the deep commitment I felt when I've run into you at conferences and listened to you speak and present, your people, and the incredible work that people are doing in this department, the programs, the innovation, the excellence, the clinical practice, really national leaders in innovative models of primary care, and how can we better take care of our patients as a team. The community engagement was important to me. I came from a department that was one of our mission pillars, was community engagement. And we had robust community engagement programs. And that was important to me because of that 4th network I mentioned. And I have seen over the years and admired this department for a long time for its innovation and its excellence. And lastly, the larger environment of CU, the School of Medicine, the dedication I saw in the leadership of the school and the institution to not only be excellent, but also to engage with the community, to embrace interdisciplinary practice in education. So as Frank said, I've got a tall order ahead of me. I'm still getting to know you. This is just starting my 4th week on the job, 3rd week on the job. And I'm getting to know you. I'm learning more every day. But one of my first things to do is to start coming around. I want us to visit where you live, where you work, where you are in your natural environments. And that's important to me, to get to know you, to make these quote unquote home visits as family doctors do. So what about the future? This talk was titled On the Horizon. So enough about me, and let's get on to the horizon part. This department has long been a leader in primary care delivery and innovation, and also integrated behavioral health. I want that to continue. I think there's much more to be done, and I think the people here are the people to do it. I want us to innovate, to validate, and that's part of the evaluation that Frank spoke about, to educate the next generation, each other, and even retrofitting the past generation. Sometimes we need to do that. And then to translate it into wider scalable systems, and then translate into policy. So what might we do that's innovative? We might look at different types of providers or care deliverers that are integrated into primary care. What is the role of caregivers themselves as part of the primary care team? We have an opportunity to innovate. Thanks to Dean Riley, we have a commitment for starting a new practice that will be in Aurora. And I see this not as a production practice, but really an innovation lab, a place where we can think outside of the box of an HOPD model and think about different ways, experiment with different ways to better deliver primary care, and then to validate it, educate, and translate. Same with behavioral health. Should we incorporate peers into our behavioral health teams? I know you're working on bringing Matt into care. And what about different types of community-based models and partnerships? Those are all things we can think about. I see us going forward with the work that has really just begun in diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. I like how people are thinking about diversity and inclusion, that it's not just defined by identity. We're thinking about things like disability, thinking about the inequities in rural health and access to care for rural populations who are also plagued by disability. The Center for Health Equity, and that is being developed, is one of the things that attracted me here. I want our department to have a big role in the Center for Health Equity and advancing the work that I think that they will be able to do. Community engagement, that was important to me and one of the big attractors for me. You've heard some about the Aurora Community Health Commons. It's just getting up and going. The faculty of this department are playing leadership roles in that. It has huge potential to approach health of a community in a different way, in a more integrated and less siloed way than what we were talking about. And I see another thing that we could do with that, and that's with workforce development. That is something that the community, they want a future for their children. And the healthcare system needs many more people than doctors and nurses. And what can we do to build a workforce, not only just the professionals and care providers, but the entire workforce of healthcare systems that look like the communities that we serve. And finally, research and evaluation. This, I think, is a thread that I believe should go throughout everything that we're doing. And I have this little graphic to the side here about translational research, bench, bedside, community. But within that is, clinical trial research, the translational work and health services research are already well known for, and policy research. Getting these things that we discover so that there's evidence-based policy and shepherd them to life in the real world. And that brings me to operations. I get asked a lot about this question, especially before I came here. COVID has changed the world in so many ways. We have new ways of working in the post-COVID world. And that may mean we need to look at our operations as a department a little bit differently. That's something that I've talked to a lot of people about. I keep asking questions and hearing people's thoughts and ideas and feelings about how we can work differently and better in the post-COVID world, where we're doing more remotely. We are able to reach people, our patients remotely. We can reach each other remotely. We can bring together groups of people in ways that I think we hadn't thought of before. So what does that mean for us as a department? I believe the culture of this department is precious. And I worry just a little bit about if we're not intentional in the post-COVID world, how do we sustain our culture? How do we nurture it? How do we grow it? Because at the end of the day, what you've accomplished as a department and what we're capable of accomplishing is really, it's going together. And that's at I have a lot of African proverbs you'll find as you get to know me. But if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, and I want us to go far, we need to go together. And finally, to paraphrase Sir Isaac Newton, I think we can see farther than others because we stand on the shoulders of giants. So I want to thank Becca and Kent, and then Frank, for so beautifully describing where we've been and where we're now poised to go. They are the giants in our field. It's their work in primary care that brought us to where the sidewalk ends. So now I believe it's time for this department to together carry forward the promise of primary care. And I believe we can see further than the others, or many others, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. So thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all you do to take care of our patients, our learners, our communities, and each other.